Some folks, we have great representation of communities. You never know, we're going to find either some assistance with work or some personal needs you might have. And so I would just recommend to say hello to folks. We have a nice, great, diverse crowd here this morning representing our community. I'd like to say good morning to Commissioner John Barr. He's here. Good morning, Commissioner Barr. Let's welcome him. He's sitting in what we call in Rotary the scooter seat area. He said he might have to leave for a meeting, so he's already warned us he's here. We're glad you're here. He's got another meeting to attend to, so when he sneaks out a little early, he's got other commitments, so thank you for being here this morning. We have some Washington County Business Award winners from 2015. Susquehanna Bank, I think, represented here this morning, at your service award, and Antietam Cables represented Large Business of the Year. Let's give them a round of applause. Congratulations. We also have, I'd like to acknowledge our Chamber Board members. Frank Morrissey, our board chair, is here this morning. Good morning, Frank. And Frank is extra happy. He's recently retired from a long career at Volvo, so congratulations, and we're glad you're still serving the community. Thank you. I'm envious. We have a number of other Chamber Board members. If you're a board member, would you just stand? I know there's at least one or two. Just like to acknowledge and talk about our host sponsor, Orrstown Bank. John Roney approached me over a month ago and said, you know, we have an idea for a presentation about cybersecurity, and obviously it's an important topic as represented by the folks who are here today. I think that's a good idea. So John and his team have put together a presentation for you this morning. So please help me welcome John Roney. He's VP, Regional Senior Loan Officer at Orrstown Bank. Good morning. Come on up.
I'll hide over here in the corner. Good morning and welcome. And thank you, Paul, for that introduction. I am the Regional Senior Loan Officer for the Maryland market of Orrstown Bank. I bring greetings from the bank, including those of us that operate within the Maryland market. And I'd like for all of the employees who are here today to please stand and be recognized. Don't be shy. We've got a nice contingent here. I'd also like to introduce a couple of our advisory board members that are with us today. Al Martin, if you would stand, Al, and Cindy Joyner. Please welcome them. And as the sponsor of this morning's Eggs and Issues, I wish to personally thank Orrstown Bank for investing in our community. And I urge all of you to consider the same if you have not already done so. With the Chamber and other local leaders, Orrstown Bank strongly believes in community and is very dedicated to that end. Since 1919, we have remained a true local bank serving local people and local businesses. Simply put, when we call you or you call us, we'll make it personal. Thanks to everyone for attending today, especially to hear our own Ben Wallace and his team on the very important topic of cybersecurity. Ben joined Orrstown Bank in early 2013 to lead the operations and technology organization within the bank. Since then, Orrstown has made significant investments in our technology foundation and is literally considered an early adopter of many emerging banking technologies. Previous to Orrstown Bank, Ben held several leadership roles with JP Morgan's consumer technology business. Most recently, Ben has been working across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania Bankers Association to shape a cybersecurity strategy for its member banks. Last but not least, Ben also holds a license to practice law in the state of Pennsylvania. We're very proud to have Ben in our family, and we welcome him here today. Thanks, Ben.
You guys hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Test. All right. Good morning. Thank you, John. So a little bit creatively this morning, we're going to try to have some fun. Who would probably rather be at the beach right now than here? I know Paul would. Yeah, he told me he was going to actually call into this if he couldn't make it. But in all honesty, we are thrilled to kind of go through the topics today. I wanted to first begin, when we were preparing for the presentation, I told my team really two things. Either this presentation had to be incredibly good or incredibly fast. So you tell us which at the end of this. But here is the agenda for this morning. Rather than myself go through 40 or 45 minutes of material, we're trying to break it up and really have the experts in each one of these areas go through it, and I'll try to knit together some pieces and parts of cyber. So we're going to talk about cybersecurity, we're going to talk about EMV and chip cars and payment technology. So hopefully you leave with at least a couple things this morning. There's a lot of material in here, probably far too much for an exit issues. You're going to get the slides, so email us afterwards if you'd like a copy of these to take back to your respective businesses. And then if you have any questions, we really do want to make this a dialogue today. So we're going to try to get through it 30 to 40 minutes and then open up for questions. And then feel free to interlace them as you can. So here's the team. We are all lucky. If technology works out this morning, we're also going to have Jimmy Kimmel help us through the presentation. So he'll be with us this morning. So let me jump right into it and introduce Andrew Lynn, who also joined from JP Morgan about a year ago, plus or minus. Really talented guy, and is helping. Really, he owns all of our security practices across Norristown. He did it nationally for JP Morgan, but is really focused. I think that's some interesting perspectives on the local fraud market and cybersecurity. So I'm going to welcome Andrew up. I'll come back up and kick off EMV. So Andrew.
This on? Yeah, it works. Morning, everybody. Good morning. For the folks who are from Orrstown, some of you already know this, but for everybody else, it's going to seem obvious. But aside from cybersecurity, I'm also a body double for Brad Pitt. I actually said that in front of a training class, and I looked around, half the class was like, oh. Really? You believe that? So, cybersecurity. These names ought to look familiar. Home Depot, Target, Michaels, P.F. Chang's. These are all big box merchants that have recently had a breach. I just read that Target settled for $10 million. So it's not just the lost revenue from the breach, it's the litigation fees and the restitution that they have to pay afterward. Anybody have a guess how much it costs per breached record? Take a guess. Go ahead. $10,000? $10,000? Okay, not quite that much. $200 is the average cost per breach record. So, you lose 10,000 records, that's $2 million. $200,000. Whatever it is. I can't do math. But you get the picture. So it's not just the big guys that are getting breached. We're actually, small merchants are up, according to Visa, 300% this year. In fact, just in July, these are 4 out of about 50 nationwide that I pulled out. Events and breaches that have happened with small merchants just in the month of July. If even a breach of, if you're a small merchant owner and it costs Target $10 million plus, even if it's 10% of that, that's a lot of money. It's not going to put the big guys out of business, but it could put you out of business for a breach. So we've been seeing some of the trends that we've been seeing, and I'll go through how the attacks actually happen. None of this is terribly rocket science. There aren't sophisticated attacks going after firewalls and trying to hack through 1,000 layers of security. It's actually much simpler than that. And I'll show you how that happens. But the consequences, what we've seen is generally 2 things happen. If they breach card payment information, like credit card numbers, generally either they're going to sell them on the black market, and you'll see our customers start seeing charges in California or in Arizona, places where they don't normally shop, and you would not expect to see that behavior. But the attackers have gotten smart too. They're actually selling cards back into the local market where the cards were stolen. So the stolen cards are being used at Giant or at Sheetz in your local neighborhood. It's much more difficult to identify those things as fraud. EMV, which we're going to talk about a little later, will help with this a little bit, but I'll leave it to the other folks who will tell you exactly. There's some pluses and minuses and things to watch out for EMV. So let's go through a quick scenario. How's it happen? You got Mr. Attacker, and that is actually what they wear. The hat and the mask and the coat. I've seen it. Generally, they're getting into your environment simply by using something called phishing. Anybody not know what phishing is? It's been all over the news lately. It's pretty common. Generally, the practice is most often they're sending you an email that looks legitimate, entices you to click on a link or open an attachment in that email, which you think is legitimate. Next thing you know, they've installed malware on your machine. Or, in some cases, they trick you into giving away valid credentials. So your network username and password. I've seen emails that come that say, look like they're from your IT department. Say, we need to validate your username and password. We've been having problems with the system. Click here. They pop up a screen that looks legitimate. People are very trusting. They type in their username and password. Now the attacker has credentials to log into your system, which they're going to use in a couple of ways. If you have remote access, and a lot of folks do because you manage your systems, not everybody's on your premise all the time. Sometimes they need to be doing stuff in the middle of the night at home when things break. So they can use those credentials to access remotely. They can use those credentials then once they're on your network to access systems on your network. If you've given away your network username and password, it's probably the same username and password that someone uses to log into a system where there's a database with lots of sensitive information. Maybe it's intellectual property, maybe it's customers' names and addresses, maybe it's credit card information. And what happened in most of the big retailer breaches was the malware got installed on their point-of-sale devices. So every time somebody swiped a card, that magstripe data was being siphoned right off and sent back to the attacker. What do they do with it? Take a guess. What does the attacker do when they get the information? Stick it in their pocket. Thank you very much. They're going to do one of two things. They're either going to create their own cloned cards and go shopping at your customer's expense, or you're right, they're going to sell it on the black market to other people who are going to clone the cards and go shopping. If passwords are stolen, credentials and passwords are the easiest way that these folks are going to get into your environment. If they can get valid credentials, they don't have to break through controls. They can use stuff that's already authorized. It becomes important to protect your login credentials. And we're going to try here a short video from Mr. Jimmy Kimmel that will show, it's humorous, but it'll show how easy it is to hopefully socially engineer someone's password. Anybody see this, by the way? I don't know how many have watched Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah? Okay, good. Here, Mike. Mike? Yeah. Shut you with the mic. Seamless. You didn't even notice it was switched, did you? You can't even tell. If we don't happen to get through this video, go home and go to YouTube.
We'll
got it?
We'll get it.
All right, we're going to get it. We'll get it. The technology is wonderful until it doesn't work.
Well, once you figure it out.
Once you figure it out. Right. None of us has figured it out. We spent our whole lives in this industry and still haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
Gotta be magic here.
Yeah.
We've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is, we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123, and as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on the Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's its name?
Jameson. I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School
Oh, when did you graduate?
in 2009. It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Have you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password, you're going to be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1.
Like my birthday,
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th. 95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95.
Yes.
Got it.
In my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 4, 6, 8, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's for me it's strong enough.
I answer 1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma. 1, 2, 3. Spell G-E.
Don't forget the G. Thank you for that.
Or Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Like,
So like,
what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name,
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
This is the Japanese version, like Godzilla with a. So this is creative, so thank you, Ben. It was good to get us through that way.
Wow. So it's humorous, but it highlights the point that it is very easy for, and attackers have figured this out, that's why they keep doing it, to socially engineer things out of people. They're trusting, and they're happy to tell you anything you want. So, what are the 6, as I mentioned, these attacks aren't sophisticated. These may seem like 6 basic things, but these are 6 things that you can do today to strengthen your cybersecurity position. And the first one is set strong passwords. I don't know if you can even see the Dilbert. It says, all passwords today contain letters, numbers, doodles, sign language, and squirrel noises. You should definitely follow that advice when you create your passwords. Install anti-malware. It's not perfect, but most of the common malware, it will pick up and it will protect you and it will clean it. It's certainly better than not installing anything at all. There are lots of anti-malware products on the market. I'm certainly not going to advocate one over the other, but generally I advise people don't get the free ones off the internet. Spend a little bit of money to get a quality anti-malware product. Back up your data. We've seen not only is malware stealing information, but some of the newer malware is aimed at destroying information. Anybody heard of ransomware? It's been in the news a lot. Anybody actually be a victim of ransomware? Not yet? Okay. Generally what ransomware is the malware comes in and it encrypts all of your data. And it says, unless you pay me $1,000, $5,000, I'm never going to decrypt this data and it's gone to you. So they essentially hold your services ransom until you pay them. So if you have backups and they're current backups, you can just simply go back to a previous backup. Pay attention to emails. A lot of the phishing that comes in is delivered via email, and there's a couple of key flags, red flags, that you can look for in an email. The first is, do you recognize the sender? If you get an email, no matter how enticing it looks, if you didn't expect it and you don't know who it is that's sending it to you, don't trust it. If the content of the email seems out of context even if you know the person, but it doesn't look like something that person would tell you or ask for, don't trust it. A lot of these emails are from attackers are not from the United States, where English is not their first language. So you will often find a lot of grammatical errors or spelling errors in email. Those are red flags that something is suspicious. Same with misspellings. Often these emails ask you or demand that you take immediate action. Your bank account is locked. Unless you click this link and give us information, you're not going to be able to use your credit cards. It demands that you take immediate action. Or iTunes is giving away free iPads. Click here to get yours now. And they'll often ask for personal information. And if you hover over the link in the email, if there's one in there, just pay attention to the URL that pops up to make sure that it matches what you think it should, and I'll show you a couple of real-world examples. So here's one. This came to Fulton Bank. I don't know, in the back it's probably hard to see, but folks in the front, any red flags jump out right away? How about this? A lot of times these will have generic salutations. If your bank, in this case if Fulton is emailing you, they know your name. They're going to likely use your name in correspondence. So if you get an email that just says, "Dear CashLink client," that's a red flag. Here's another one, probably hard to see because it's kind of buried in the middle. There's some grammatical errors. If you look at the URL that's at the bottom, though, the link, it actually does say fultonbank.com. If you just hover your mouse over top of that, you'll see that Fulton Bank, which I put in bold here, also has some stuff after it. That's not taking you to Fulton Bank. It's going to take you to a site that looks just like Fulton Bank's CashLink site and ask you to type in your username and password. As soon as you click submit, generally, the message will come back and say, "Hey, the system's down right now, check back later." In the meantime, someone's harvested your credentials, and it's logging into the real CashLink site. Here's another one from iTunes. Any folks in the front, anything jump out at you right away? Dear customer, yep. Anything else? There's a little bit of poor grammar. You're right. Verify now. Asking for immediate action. This link actually takes you to a site, a spoof site, an iTunes site that's in China. And again, it's meant to harvest your credentials. So pay attention to those red flags. If any of you use remote access, if you remember the little chart of how the attackers get in, they're going to try to use remote access against you because it's available anywhere on the internet. If it's running all the time, it's open for someone to try and take advantage of. If you don't need it to be running all the time, only enable it when you do need it. And then finally, know who to call in the event that something happens. Because in this day and age, as you've seen from the news and the 300% increase in small merchants being breached, it's no longer a question of if, but a matter of when. So you want to know, who do I call when it happens? There are now more insurance providers are getting more sophisticated at this. You can actually buy cybersecurity coverage that will pay for things like communicating out to your customers what happened, recovering information, bringing in will cover some of those things. It's not cheap, but it is definitely something that you want to consider. Good, 6 key things, easy enough? Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to turn it back over to Ben.
Good stuff, thank you, Andrew. Does anyone actually have cyber security insurance? Doesn't involve working at a bank.
The insurance company here sells it. You start taking orders now.
Are you getting a lot of interest in cyber?
Slowly but surely. The concern was, as you said, they're small businesses and think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. They're not looking at me. But now, we're showing that, oh, yeah, they are. In fact, they're easier to get to than the big dogs.
Big guys, yeah. A lot of the carriers, I'm not sure if you guys are doing this, beyond business interruption insurance, they're actually providing for if you actually lost revenue or customers as a result, which is a really interesting carve out of these policies. So, as Andrew said, please take this back to your teams. Pretty basic items, we believe, but we find helping our customers and a lot of our small businesses, a lot of people are not doing that. So shifting gears a little bit, but really playing off of what Andrew said, everyone in the room have a chip card in their wallet yet, by chance? Okay. So they're out there, but I think we'd all struggle if we try to decide why they're out there, right? And how do they actually work? And are they really relevant? What does the October liability shift mean? What is liability at all around these cards? So you probably either are a consumer interested or you're looking for something, Friday night party to talk to your friends about. The sort of fast fact is, while the United States only represents about 25% of the global spend on cards, we have over 50% of fraud that's getting worse in this country alone. So it is a big problem for the United States, mostly because we're very late to the game. Very quickly, EMV is a very, very old standard, unfortunately, almost 30 years old at this point. We're going to talk about why I think that's really concerning. We're spending a ton of money. A lot of these retailers are putting a lot of effort into this. You got to ask yourself why. Is it even relevant? I wanted to hit this at a high level and not go through the technical pieces. We're going to have a team kind of take you through the flow, which I think is pretty interesting. But the chip itself, what you see on the card is just actually a contact plate. The chip's actually in the back embedded, and it has some intelligence in it that the magstripe does not. So the whole makeup of the card allows it to be much more intelligent if the industry will empower the card to do that. And we're going to talk about why that's relevant. So this can be a pretty powerful thing, EMV, unfortunately, the way it's actually being rolled out, for the most part, is not going to be that powerful. You know, there's, if you walk into one of the national retailers, Walmart is probably the most progressive in rolling out EMV. If you've actually been to them, you actually, for the most part, can use an EMV card. I'm not going to show this video because of time, but if you get the presentation, it's actually an experience working with a representative of Walmart trying to process a PNC Visa debit transaction. And she goes on to say that she got no training, she has no idea how these cards work. It popped up one day, right? And this is the most progressive merchant in the country, 2 months before the liability shift will occur. So this has been going on for years, and Walmart, the most progressive merchant in the country, is struggling. I wanted to take one more shot at having Jimmy Kimmel give us some insight on all these payment technologies. So we'll try to get one more shot here. I think part of the problem that we have is trying to get our customers to embrace these things. Yeah, you can hold that.
Did anyone make a purchase with your using your iPhone today? It's that today the much anticipated launch of Apple Pay, the new mobile payment system.
This EMV process has the very risk of doing the exact same thing. Tokenization, EMV and Apple Pay are very similar. But one thing I wanted to talk about before we actually get into the mechanics of this, and this is really not well understood, but there's a decision that every issuer and frankly every merchant has to make around how these work. And if you've used these quite a bit, you may already notice this. It's called the cardholder verification method. And while it's really maybe not good to memorize this, I think it's interesting to recognize I'm going to simplify it, there's 3 options that the country has an option. You could do no cardholder verification method, which means I can just put the card in, and much like on smaller purchases, I can just walk out of the store and be authorized. I can put the card in and I can sign a piece of paper, right? We'll talk about how crazy that signature is in a minute. Or I can put the card in and I can enter a PIN. So the opportunity as an industry, as all the banks and all these networks had, we could choose one of these options. What do you think that the United States we had 50% of the fraud in the entire world in the United States. We have a brand new smart card that has a chip in it. We have the most secure way. Just take a guess on what the United States tried to do. Number one, exactly right. Number 1 and number 2. So if you look at the biggest, one of the biggest issuers in the country, Chase, their number 1 preferred way to use these cards is signature, meaning it's obviously the least secure. You put it in, you sign, which means nothing, and then the second, if this doesn't work, then it'll fall back to no verification at all. So when you're working with your issuers, your banks, recognize that they have a choice. You do have certain folks in the country that are choosing to have a PIN used with these cards. But guess what those folks probably have is really a overwhelming reason that you have to use their card. So maybe it's a credit union, maybe it's a loyalty product or a store-branded card that you really have to use the card. You have no other choice. But our biggest fear, I can tell from Orangetown and from JP Morgan Chase, is we do not want to be the card that Jimmy Kimmel alludes to, that it's a pain in the butt to use, it takes forever in line. So if this doesn't work extremely well, then the only way that the banks and the issuer, sort of banks and merchants are going to guarantee it is the signature piece, because everyone knows how to do it already. So millions of dollars, frankly billions of dollars on EMV, brand new card technology, 30 years in the making, and we basically just commoditized it down to chip and signature. So you kind of be a little bit cynical for a moment. This is actually what an EMV receipt looks like if you haven't seen it, and a lot of junk here, but at the end of the day, you see for this pack of Tic Tacs, this was a no signature required, so no CVM at all. So when you're thinking about how these cards work, realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all. They're highly customizable, and they're very, very powerful by themselves. Unfortunately, the United States, likely in most cases, is not going to take advantage of that. So I want to hand this over to Jana Passamonte, who runs operations in Orangetown. We're going to talk about what's the point of the signature and then the liability around this. I want to have some dialogue for a minute. So Jen?
Janet, hold that mic a little close to you. All right, please.
Okay.
Hopefully it still works.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Look closer.
A little closer? I can talk louder, so.
Here. See what's
Is it on?
Yep.
That would be why. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
technology, so.
You are now. You just got a field promotion.
Oh, awesome.
All right, good morning, everybody. I wanted to talk through real quick. I do oversee operations at Orrstown, so I'm the one that's responsible for all the dispute claims that come through Orrstown Bank and handling those when customers have fraud on their debit cards. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit about signatures and why that is not a real viable option, especially for the bank perspective. The most secure way, has been pointed out, is to do the chip and PIN technology where you have to enter a secure PIN code. If you do have to enter a signature, the only real onus on the merchant side is that they get a signature on the receipt. It doesn't matter if I have Ben Wallace's card, obviously, I'm not Ben Wallace, and I sign Ben Wallace and the merchant doesn't verify that I'm not Ben Wallace. If it comes back as a dispute claim at Orrstown's financial institution, I'm still liable for that transaction being fraudulent. The merchant's not. They just collected the signature. It could be an X, it could be a Y, it could be a squiggle, it could be, Mickey Mouse. And if they've collected the signature, they're no longer liable. The financial institution is liable. So that's one of the instances of why signatures are just not a valid point of identification anymore at this point. We've talked a lot about the October deadline for liability shift. So one of the things I do want to make clear on that is the liability shift is not a regulation, it's not a law. What it really is a risk tolerance that financial institutions and card issuers have to decide on. So as of October 1st, they can decide to go to the chip-based card, but they're not forced to. So obviously, the chip-based card is more expensive, so it has a cost to it. How we roll it out can cause issues as well. It's hard to do a mass reissue of cards, those kind of things to our cardholders. And what it really means is who is going to pay for the fraudulent transaction. So what the shift does is in today's day and age, before October, the bank is typically liable for the fraudulent transaction. After October 1st, it depends who has the best technology with the chip-based process. So if the bank has the chip-based cards and we've issued them to our cardholders, and the merchant has not, the liability of those fraudulent card-present transactions shift over to the merchant, and the bank is no longer liable. If the merchant has the appropriate technology to take the chip-based card, and the bank has not issued a chip-based card, then the bank is liable for the fraudulent transaction. So that is the big difference. If we both have moved towards EMV, and I've issued a chip-based card, the merchant also has the terminal, then the liability shift comes back to the financial institution. So, in other words, does the consumer care? In all of those situations, the standard disputes in the Reg E law still applies. So a consumer still can dispute the transaction. They weren't there. They didn't make it. It was fraudulent. Either the financial institution or the merchant is responsible for that transaction. So it's not affecting the consumer. So if they still like their swiping card instead of their EMV chip card, they're not going to be liable. So there's not a lot of onus on the customer to decide to use the chip-based card. Does the merchant care? Well, if you don't make the switch, and most of the financial institutions that are issuing cards in your area are doing that, then the liability will shift over to the merchant. So the merchant has to make that risk-based decision. Is it worth their cost, their updating of their equipment? Are most of the financial institutions in their area switching to EMV type cards? As you heard Ben say earlier, we're moving pretty slow on this, so you might have a little bit of time. So this is really a chart going through the time frames. As Ben said, we are really late to the game in the United States. Over 80 countries are already switched over to this global technology. So we have been very, very slow. We still have a few more years for things like ATM machines. So ATM machines do not have to be moving towards this new technology until October of 16. And the real interesting piece is gas pumps. So I don't know about you, but I go to the gas pump all the time. So that technology does not have to change until October of 17. And we're seeing a lot at the financial institutions locally, skimmers on the gas pumps. That fraud is increasing dramatically. So those aren't going to change until October of 17. So I thought that was interesting to share as well. EMV challenges. The traditional concentrations of fraud on the weakest link and those that are last to the party. So most people are predicting that the fraudsters are going to start targeting the merchants and the banks that have not made the switch. So that is another thing to consider as well. They're smarter than you think. They pay attention to those details. I can tell you, being in the community bank space for a long time, we always thought it wasn't going to happen to us. Well, I'm here to tell you, Orrstown Bank experiences a lot of fraud now. They know who we are. They found the small guys. They're going to be watching us very closely to see what the smaller banks and merchants are doing, because they know it's going to take us a little bit longer to get there. I'm going to turn it over to Sashi and Jason in a minute to walk through exactly how this card works. It does take a little bit longer to run your transaction through based on the technology and the chip. And that component, customers, as Ben said earlier, might not choose to use the chip card because they want to make sure the merchant knows how to take it. They're a little bit nervous on that, and it's going to take a little bit more time. So we have some great demo equipment, fancy technology here for us to walk through so that you can all see it.
Good morning. Good morning. So here I have just a normal everyday terminal. You'll see this exact option at like Walmart, Target today. So same size and everything. But, you know, when like I first had my first EMV experience, I looked like a rookie. So you know, there's an educational component here that we want to make sure you all kind of solve this the first time, so that you didn't make the same mistakes I did. You know, when I was at Target. So, and of course, while I was there, I didn't tell her what I did. I worked with electronic services. You know, she's like, well, the banks really have to educate us. I said, yeah, there's banks. So I want to share that knowledge with you. So Hasashi wants to make a larger purchase. And he pulls out his bank card, and of course it has a chip on it. So he is ready to make his purchase. So what does he do? Because he's a creature of habit, he swipes his card. And the machine, recognizing that it has an EMV chip on it, makes a noise.
Imagine a noise.
So the machine, because that retailer has upgraded their technology, they want to make sure that you're using your card as an EMV enabled. So Sashi is going to insert his card in the machine. Now, here's where I made my second or third mistake. Me being creature of habit, using ATM machines, I stuck that thing in there and I'm pushing as hard as it goes. It just won't go in. However, EMV only needs to read about 1/3 of your card. So what you'll do is you crack your card, break the machine. So just slide in gently, and it only takes about 1/3 of your card. Now Sasha just made a mistake. Keep your card in the machine because it'll go beep. So as you make your transaction, leaving your card, I'm in there, it's going to, this time, it's reading the one-time password on that card to verify and complete that it's called transaction. That's the token verification piece of it. Depending on your, the retailer, you might either have to sign here, you might use your pen, or not, do it like either. And afterwards is when I'm going to prompt you to pull out your card, and then your transaction is completed.
Yeah,
it is as simple as that.
Yeah. It generates a unique code every time you do a transaction. So it is the secure way of doing your debit card transaction. So this chip, right, it's hard to replicate this chip. So you cannot take this chip and put on some other card. So that's why it becomes a secure transaction.
So you don't have to physically enter your PIN?
depending on the terminal and the merchant, right? Some of them will force you to like go enter the PIN, and it also depends on the issuer. So depending on that, the liability also shifts.
And the size of the transaction. So as you know today, if you go to McDonald's and buy like a cheeseburger, you don't often have to sign or enter your PIN. You can just get your cheeseburger. So like Ben said, you buy a pack of Tic Tacs, typically a transaction size like that, you may not need to enter a PIN.
We also do have a small terminal here. Afterwards, you want to come see what one actually looks like. We're going to have it here for you. So, go to the next one. We're going to see who is listening to like Janice. So there are these multiple scenarios. Is the first one?
Yeah, I think this is a traditional scenario, right? Where you are using your regular card, the debit card or a credit card, which has a magnetic strip, and then the terminal is not an EMV terminal. At that time, right, the liability, right, again, a merchant is not responsible for any liabilities there. It's going to be the issuer who is responsible for that. So that's the first scenario. Yeah, the second scenario, right, here you have a traditional magnetic stripe, but okay, you are at the EMV terminal, right? And again, the liability here is,
this is the chip used at a traditional magnetic. So because the merchant hasn't upgraded, but the card provider has, the merchant owns that like your liability.
Yep. Okay, and the third scenario here, right? Both the card is EMV enabled and the terminal is also EMV enabled. At that time, right, a merchant is not liable. So that is the third scenario. So that's why I think, as Jana said, right, if the issuer is already EMV, right, then I think if you upgrade your terminal to EMV, then the liability shifts to the issuer.
And this is the best case scenario, because if everyone's using the technology, the issuer and the merchant, we should see less in-person fraud happening. So this is our desired state. And then, like Janice said, ATMs and automated fuel dispensers, of course, they're not going to shift that liability until October 2017. So now you've all seen this once, and you love the experts. Please share this knowledge so no one else has to look silly.
Thanks, Ben. As I said earlier, this will be a slow process. One of the major reasons it is a slow process, obviously it's a change in technology. With a change in technology comes additional expense, both on the merchant's part and on the financial institution issuer's part. The chip cards are more expensive, and we need to decide as financial institutions, how are we going to do this reissue? Are we going to give everybody at our financial institution brand new cards all at once, or are we going to reissue them in a slower process? It will be many years until all merchants, including the smaller merchants, come up to speed and adopt this new technology. When they are adopting this new technology as a merchant, I do suggest this is a great time to look at your overall security at your merchant terminals. Make sure that you're dealing with your the person that you work with on merchant services, that you've looked at all the settings and capabilities that the terminals have, and that you're looking at your systems and you're applying some cybersecurity thought process to how you're setting things up as well. There will be an increase of other fraud types of transactions. So of course, as you know, fraudsters are not going to just pack up their bags and go away and say, we're not going to create any more fraudulent transactions anymore. What they are predicting is that type of fraud will change. So the EMV chip helps to stop the card present type transactions where somebody has duplicated your card and they physically show up to a merchant to make a purchase. Those types of transactions will slow down and work towards stopping, but we will still have breaches. We will still have card fraud. It will just be used in other manners. So it's not going to eliminate that type of fraud. And just another piece that Ben shared with the Apple Pay, the tokenization technologies. We continue to get better and have new payment technologies, but in the United States, we are slow to adopt those. And we're hoping that through education, maybe we can help make that a little quicker. Thank you.
So hopefully that was helpful. When we talk about these topics, I'm just one trivia because I can't help myself. On this, so this whole idea of cursive, do you know where cursive came from? Anybody have any idea why cursive was even developed?
First grade teachers.
Well, as I understand it, well before my time, right? It's the quill, it's the ink, it's the scroll. You want to lift the actual quill off the scroll. So how long ago was that? We're talking a long time ago. It's funny to realize that with millions and billions of dollars of technology, we're still on really fundamentally the same thing. They stopped teaching cursive in schools, but our payment solution still uses cursive. So hopefully that was helpful. We, as a bank, really feel, and I think a lot of small businesses are with us, that it's a joint problem. So we wanted to get a little bit of information out there. It doesn't become highly technical in a hurry, but if you walk away with a couple things, some key points on cyber, where EMV is going, it's not a fire drill. You as consumers, I think you will not have to use these cards. Frankly, Walmart will still struggle through the October date, and many merchants, even if you guys are a small merchant in the room, a lot of you do not have these terminals yet. It will frankly be years until the United States catches up with Canada. Canada's still struggling with the rollout. They were a couple of years ago. So let's stop there. I want to talk a little about any questions, if that was helpful, any other concerns, either on the larger topic of cyber or the payment and EMV pieces. Because as Jenna said, Apple Pay is coming a couple of years from now. Where will that be? And frankly, mobile payments and Apple Pay, it'll be 5 or 6 years before that becomes relevant. Sir?
You may have said it at the very beginning and I missed it, but what exactly does EMV stand for?
EMV is the Europay. It's basically it's an acronym for the standard. Europay,
MasterCard and Visa.
Yeah. MasterCard and Visa. So it's a joint.
Oh, okay.
Although it does
I thought it was
apply
electronic
to
magnetic.
Discover Card, American Express as well. So it's not just MasterCard and Visa
Yeah, but
payment structure.
originally when they developed the standard, right, I think these 3 players were included. That's why they called it as EMV.
Question, so a number of the areas outside the U.S. are as much as 7 years ahead of us. So has it moderated fraud to a significant degree?
It's moderated, as Janet said. What all the banks in our region are seeing is card-present fraud transactions. So it's really they're taking the credit cards and they're duplicating them and they're using them at our local merchants. The traditional card-present fraud has been moderated in Europe and Canada. It's been unfortunately replaced with other types of fraud, which is the internet fraud, card not present fraud. So any counterfeit card present fraud, it does help. Doesn't help if all stolen. That's still a problem if you lose your card. Because as Sashi said, but if all you're doing is putting the chip in and signing, you can have stolen your card. But it will make it very hard for the folks to steal and clone cards, which is a huge help for us. Our fear, though, is they're not going to arrest. They're going to continue to go online and do fraud that way.
Is it technology for reading the chip in a chip reader? Is it an RF technology?
No, it's not. On most of these cards, there's 2 ways. There's a traditional chip, so you put the chip in and it's energized by the terminal. And there's also contactless cards that'll have a chip and actually an RF radio frequency antenna in the card, so you can do both, right? Practically, that card's about a $7 card to produce, and not many banks are going to put a $7 card in your hand. That has an antenna, that has a CPU and a chip. So most of the time, you'll get an EMV card without the contactless.
There's a skimming problem with the RF is still available.
Yeah, that really shook some people up when it first came out. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. So people have backed away from the contactless card. It wasn't really a tangible problem, but it got enough press that people stopped using it. But it's a good question. Yes?
You hear about the people having some sort of scanner that they can just walk by your wallet and scan. Is this type of card protect against that?
It goes to the question asked here. If you do have an RF antenna chip card, and there's jokes around you need a metal wallet. Right?
Okay.
It is certainly possible to take that information off.
I think there's a difference though between the traditional cards that had an antenna and no chip.
Yeah.
It's broadcasting a mag stripe all the time. You can just walk by and if you've got the right reader, you can read it. With EMV, it's not broadcasting. It's broadcasting a cryptographic representation of the mag stripe, which is not usable for any transaction. So
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 the
EMV,
chips will
contactless,
protect against
that
whatever
that would get better.
you hear about.
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions?
How much fraud is in store as opposed to without the card? I mean, what percentage are you addressing with the chip?
The United States has radically shifted toward the card-present counterfeit fraud. So that is what we're seeing today. I don't know, Jana, if you look at a percentage, and other banks from the room, we're probably seeing 70, 80%
Yeah.
in-store fraud counterfeit. Tens of thousands of dollars any given month. So that's by far right now. And again, that will likely change once EMV gets out there, but that's going to be several years, and then it'll be a whole new fraud landscape. Are there any small businesses in here that actually, are merchants that actually have these terminals? I don't know if we have anybody in the room that's actually deployed these things. We get a lot of questions around. It's funny because this is one step. There's also discussions around how do you encrypt the traffic from this. So if you have, a smaller merchant or a car wash, there's all these smaller, there's all these other ways to encrypt transactions as well. Any other questions? Any other?
Just an observation, maybe additional step in the process, and that's education of employees. They're the one component, this whole process, you can't put a chip in, yet. And they're the weakest link. So you talk the phishing scenario. I saw an organization yesterday, the IT department sent out an email that said, don't open the attached email, it's not from us. And they had the attached email with it. So that people could identify. A lot of education really necessary from the employee perspective to help prevent some of these breaches.
Yeah, I think we live, I know Andrew does, we're so close to this that we often think these basic 6 steps, we really need to talk about those. But you'd be surprised, most of the problems are very basic issues. And these people are not doing complex issues at all. They're just very, very basic attacks. So if you're not doing the issues.
Humans are and will always be the weakest link.
Given where we are on this whole implementation process, and I'm assuming we're looking at an October 1st date on the new rules taking place, do you expect there might be some pushback or delay in that? Because people really, you get it out in the general community, people are clueless on this whole issue, particularly the liability shifts.
Yeah. So there will be no delay in the liability shift, but I think it doesn't really mean anything for consumers anyway. They don't care. The only people who are really making money in this whole proposition, well, frankly, no one is. That's the biggest fear. Merchants are spending a bunch of money on terminals. The banks would like to think they're going to save money, but we're probably not. And frankly, that's why we were 25 years behind. No one's going to pay for this. And the only reason, frankly, we're moving as fast as we are is because we have had some really large breaches, and that's why the likes of Target and Walmart are pushing this out. Yeah, the liability will happen, but again, it'll be several years before it actually is actually gone. Any other thoughts from the banks in the room in terms of what you're doing differently? Any other? I know we have some other out there